Welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. Massive episode today. You're doing SEC preview. Two-time guest Kasey Kazliner and a new guest joining me, Andrew Geisler. Welcome, fellas. It's good to be back. Kasey, you were for college basketball a couple months back, but Andrew, you're here for the first time. Andrew's author of a Heisman column for USC back last year. Are you gonna do it again? Can we get a preview?
Maybe it's not going to be as debatable as last year, though.
Very
I know you
true.
didn't like some of my picks.
I don't know. We don't. We never know. We went back and forth a lot on who we thought should have been Heisman. But anyways, we're gonna jump straight in because we're doing the SEC preview. I've asked these guys to come with a couple superlatives. I prepared them for this, and we're gonna jump in. Andrew, you're the new guy on the podcast. I'm gonna
Oh
ask
no.
you first. Who is going? We're just gonna jump straight into this. Who is going to
Mhm.
win the SEC? Who are they going to play?
Yeah, I think everyone's gonna get a little mad at me on this one. First, I think Bama's winning it. Bama's winning it. Yeah, I know. I know.
Whoa,
Immediate eyebrows
whoa!
up.
I
Whoa.
thought this
Um,
was gonna be a crazy chalk one.
no, I wasn't gonna go like LSU or Ole Miss, but I think Alabama's definitely they learned last year, especially Kalen DeBoer, that there's levels to this stuff, right? It like Kalen DeBoer isn't coming in to the SEC, and they're not playing a Colorado of 8 years ago when Kalen DeBoer was at Washington. He's realizing that even the Mississippi states that he play are good football teams. Who I think they're going to play, it's either going to be Texas or Georgia. I think. Well, you guys both have eyebrows up. I still think Mississippi State will just absolutely destroy any of the. I mean, even the new Pac-12 teams just absolutely wipe them up. But I think that you guys
Mississippi State's pretty
disagree.
bad.
I
Mississippi State is
100%
pretty
disagree with
bad.
that.
They're
Mississippi
one of the
State
worst defenses in
sucks,
the
dude. They are
country.
terrible. They're the
I
worst
still
Power
think they're
Five
better.
team. Power Four.
I still think they're better than Colorado from whatever years ago. Not from pre-prime. Pre-prime. You have to go back
Like
pre-prime.
the one
That Colorado team was so
2022.
bad. Yeah, that team was so terrible.
Mississippi State is winning at most like two, 3 games. But sure, go on.
If that, it would have to
Yeah.
be out of conference.
Yeah, I don't know.
I,
I can't say I know Mississippi State's schedule off the top of my head, but Casey, right?
Well, yeah.
Go
The,
on.
the problem with Bama, before I get into mine, is the quarterback position.
Yes.
mhm.
I mean, again, they couldn't really win anything meaningful with Jalen Milroe. So who's to say? And he's going to the NFL. He's a solid, QB. I actually really like Milroe. But who's to say? Wow, Terrence disagreeing with that. Scott,
Jalen Milroe
like
cannot
he's not
throw
going to
the
be
ball.
starting for the
I don't know.
Seahawks in week 7.
The most important part of the quarterback position, Jalen Milroe cannot do. He cannot
They
throw the
said that
ball.
about Lamar. They said that about Lamar. But anyways, let me get into my
There's
pick.
no way you just compare Jalen
I'm not
Milroe to
comparing them.
Lamar
I'm not
Jackson.
comparing them. I'm not comparing them. Lamar is way better. But I'm saying the same concerns you had about Lamar, they have about
One
Milroe.
won the Heisman.
Okay, well, Milroe was on an SEC team and went to the Rose Bowl.
Oh
So,
my
but
God.
anyways, let me get my pick.
Okay,
Point
yeah.
is, I don't like Bama this year. I think they'll finish top 4, top 5. Well, I think yeah, top 4 in the SEC. I got Texas. I mean, it's the easy pick, but it is my pick. I think they'll beat Georgia, a rematch of last year. They're also going to play each other in the regular season, so that'll be telling of what's to come. I think it's in November. I mean, it's Arch Manning. He's going to be a big upgrade over Quinn Ewers, in my opinion. He's got that elite mobility, running wise. They have Contravian Wisner, who broke out last year, running back over 1,000 yards. And then that's on top of wide receiver core that was kind of rebuilding last year. Of course, they bring in Isaiah Bond, but they lost 3 guys, including Xavier Worthy, to the NFL after the 2023 season. Again, the offensive line is the question mark, but it's Arch Manning. He's a guy who can evade pressure. They also help the D line in the portal, so it's Texas. I don't need to convince you. They're going to be a consensus shoe-in for the CFP. They also brought in my Cal guy, Jack Endries at tight end. He could be one of the best tight ends in 2025. With Georgia, I like them, and I think under Kirby, like they're going to be an elite team regardless. But they lost a lot of guys, including Trevor Etienne. And the running game is going to be a big question mark in 2025. Also, Gunnar Stockton, a big wild card for me still. They also lost a lot of defensive players, Jalen Walker as well to the NFL. So yeah, I got Texas winning. I don't think the SEC title game is going to be close. I think Texas is going to win by 20, honestly.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think that you said shoe in, so immediately it made me think of the shoe. Do you think the game Texas plays OSU immediately is going to help them, or is it going to hurt them moving forward? Like, because that's a brutal game, and there's a good chance they go down 0-1 to start the season. I personally think
That's a
there's a
good
good
question.
chance.
Yeah, no, I looked at their schedule last night. That's a good question because that's a huge game. I mean, everyone's gonna be watching that game. If it's not college game day, I don't know what will be that week. But I think they're gonna win that game. But if they do lose it, I think it is a huge character building game.
Hmm.
Especially with a young team and for Arch Manning as well. But I do think they're gonna win that game. I mean, I think Ohio State's a boogeyman in the Big Ten, but I think still, Texas is Texas this year. They look legit. Ohio State lost a lot of pieces after last year. They still won the title. I get it, but yeah, that's a good question. I think they will win, but it could be a big measuring stick kind of game for them heading into week two.
I agree with all that. I think both, speaking for Ohio State too, I think it's measuring for both of those teams how they'll match up against the best teams in the country. Because I do honestly think that's probably two of the best teams in the country, two of the top four, I'd say. Casey, I'm going to agree with you. I think Texas is going to win it. I think they're going to beat Georgia. I look, it's boring, but I think that those are by far the best two teams. Something interesting I saw, there is no teams in the SEC which have a win total over 10.5. They're all sitting at 9.5, which I
Hmm.
think is crazy. Obviously, it's kind of different schedules, but speaking specifically to Texas, Arch Manning, that receiving core, that run game, I think it's by far the best when you compare it to the rest of the SEC. And then I'll talk about Alabama later. But I think comparatively, a lot of these other teams don't have the quarterback play to win it. I don't think Gunnar Stockton is all that good for Georgia, so I don't think they're going to do that much. And I mean, Carson Beck, he was fine. I didn't think he was that good. So when you're downgrading him to Gunnar Stockton, I don't, yeah, the shout out Andrews Polo. Um, I don't think they're going to be able to do that much. So I think Texas is going to walk away with this one. I'm not going to say 20 plus, but I think they win the SEC pretty handily, pretty
Wow,
easily.
I agree with Terrence.
I know that's a shocker. That never happens. But that kind of, Andrew, you kind of teased what I want to talk about earlier or later. Well, who's going to be the worst team in the SEC? This is probably, I would say, a consensus, but Andrew, I want to hear you first. Who do you think is the worst team in the SEC?
Going based off of my previous statement, I still think that Mississippi State's the worst team. I think that's yeah. Just because I think they're better than a Colorado from not long ago or like a Stanford from last year doesn't still mean I don't think they're the worst team. I still think they're terrible.
I don't think they're better than Stanford last year. I thought Stanford was terrible, but I thought they were.
Ashton Daniels, baby. Yeah, anyways.
Yeah, no, Casey, what do you think? Because I don't think there's too much debate on this
Yeah,
one.
I mean, I also have Mississippi State. They have a tough schedule too. They play Arizona
Hmm.
State out of conference week two. They also have to play Texas, Georgia, and Florida. And I mean, it really the question mark for them winning 0 games in the SEC versus like 2 or 3 is Blake Shapen being good, and staying healthy. He was injured last year. They had some good portal pickups, but yeah, Mississippi State's gonna be bad.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna agree. It's Mississippi State's gonna suck. Yeah, there's not much to say about them. Obviously, Mike Leach passed away a couple years ago, and that kind of screwed their program. So that's pretty much all that is. But let's move on to some other things. Who is going to be the conference player of the year? Now, obviously, there's an offensive and defensive player of the year, but who do you think will just be the conference player of the year? Will say you can pick offensive or defenses, whichever one you want. And Andrew,
Casey,
sorry,
all you.
sorry,
Me?
yeah,
Go
yeah.
for
This is the
it. Go
order
for
I'm
it.
going in.
All right. I am going to go Arch Manning. I think that it's not that bold of a pick. No, I wasn't going to go something like Ty Simpson or anything Alabama was. But I think that you look at his schedule, that Ohio State games for him is going to be huge. That's going to be like, all right, listen, here it is, right? Then you're going to go play San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston. So those are your 3 games. If I am anybody that has any decision-making ability on Texas, he's playing every single snap in those 3 games. I'm not worrying about injuries. I'm not worrying about anything except get him ready for that game against Florida, at Florida, right? Because then you go Oklahoma, you have a little bit, and then that Georgia game, which is absolutely huge, and then Texas A&M, who I think is kind of a little bit of a sleeper team. I wouldn't say my biggest wild card team, but I think definitely a sleeper team at the end of the schedule. So if he can get through that Ohio State game and then truly learn in a game setting his playbook, I think that by the end of the year, there's nobody that has the ceiling that he has.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I just think because we'll get to my pick because not to for you, I have someone different, even though I think he'll be a top contender for the Heisman. he is set up so well to win it is the thing. I mean, I'm not going to say Texas has been babied into the SEC, but comparatively to like Oklahoma and who
Yeah.
they play a pretty soft schedule. I mean, obviously, you're playing Ohio State out of conference, but in conference, Georgia is by far, I would say not, I'm not going to say their only test, like you mentioned, Texas A&M. They play some good teams, but it's not the same as Oklahoma or some other teams in the SEC gauntlet. I think Arch is set up pretty well. But Casey, how about you?
Yeah, I also have Arch, so I'll keep it quick. He's such a focused young QB. I mean, it's his team now, right? That's the biggest thing for me. He was in the shadows for a couple of years, and I know he took the red shirt. But now it's his team. He's the most developed young QB out of anybody really in the country. The mobility, his arm ability. I mean, just talking about him, he's such an exciting prospect. While I do have him, I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Garrett Nussmeier, Lenore Sellers surprise people just because I feel like, I know that, like you said, there's technically an offensive award and a defensive award, but I mean, those guys I feel like have proved that they can give him a run for his money. I'm not saying he's not necessarily going to win an award in the SEC, but if he's the guy that wins the Heisman, I could see the SEC giving Nussmeier, Sellers, somebody like that, that award. So I like those two as well, but yeah, I got Arch Manning.
Yeah, no, it's a good pick. It's a safe pick. I am going to go with Garrett Nussmeier. I think Nuss is going to be able to just sling the ball this season. It's still a factor of LSU cannot build a defense. They're going to be in these high scoring games where Nussmeier has to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. He obviously lost some weapons from past years. But Nick Anderson, Barry Brown, he can throw the ball at these guys. These guys are experienced receivers. He's going to have that opportunity to just sling it out wide. I think LSU is going to be a very pass heavy offense. I could see Nussmeier throwing for like 4,000 yards and 35 touchdowns. Just had crazy numbers, but LSU goes like 8-4, 9-3 because Brian Kelly is only a mediocre coach and they don't have a defense. So I could see him just being an absolute statistical monster, but LSU just not being all that good. It is a little counterintuitive of what I said for my Heisman predictions, because I think I had Arch over him, but I still think Nussmeier is going to have like a phenomenal season overall. He'll probably be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to where does Blake Baker elevate the defense? Like at what level does he elevate it? And again, I think out of all the QBs in the upcoming NFL draft, I mean, it's a deep class QB wise. I think Nussmeier has the best arm by far. I think it's better than Arch Manning's. Not to say that Arch can't develop it to that level, but Nussmeier's arm. I mean, I was looking at some scouting. He has 99 out of 100, ranked on his arm strength, which is insane on the deep ball. I think his short ball is a little bit more inaccurate, but if you give him the deep ball, he's hitting his targets. And so I definitely agree with you there. I think he's definitely a guy you could shock people for the SEC Player of the Year.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't want to talk too much about LSU because I might be talking about them later. So
all right, yeah,
maybe.
fair enough. Um, well, let's move on to the largest disappointment. Who is going to be just an absolute loser, let down their fans this year? Andrew, we'll start with you again.
I'm gonna go with this one might be a little bit of a warmer take. I'm gonna say Ole Miss. You look at their schedule and it just what's going on? Who do they play? I love looking at schedules and thinking about the teams, whether good or bad, looking at ceiling and looking at floors. They play at Georgia. That's a loss. They aren't winning that game. They play at Oklahoma. That's going to be a tough game in my opinion for Ole Miss. At Oklahoma is not necessarily the easiest thing ever. Other than that, they have nothing except LSU, which in my opinion is a very, very good team. I don't care that Ole Miss is at home. I think they lose to LSU in that game. And I just think that there's in those games that they play those good teams, they're just going to get destroyed. Everybody else, it's going to be tight games. They'll win by a handful. But when they play Georgia, they're losing by 20, right? When they play LSU, they're losing by a lot. And when they play Oklahoma, there's a chance that they lose that game as well. So I think Ole Miss, if you're looking from last year to this year, there's going to be such a disappointment. And I say that because last year was such like a solid year for them that they're expecting all this like great stuff and they're just not going to get it. So that's what I think biggest disappointment would be Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these SEC teams at the top have questionable quarterback situations, and Ole Miss being one of
Mhm.
them. You go from like a proven guy in Jackson Dart to, oh, what's his name? And
19-year-old Austin Simmons
thank
is
you.
their
Yeah,
new
like
quarterback. Yeah.
that's a lot of pressure to have on a 19-year-old's shoulders. And they also, it's another team that lost a lot of talent to the NFL. Obviously, that defensive line, guys like Walter Nolan going to the draft, and then two other receivers drafted in the NFL. I think Ole Miss is gonna hugely disappoint, despite Lane Kiffin being a very solid coach.
Hmm.
Yeah, it wouldn't be college football season without Ole Miss disappointing, especially late in the season, right? Um, so I got Tennessee as my biggest disappointment. I mean, I think it's honestly a pick that if we looked at it maybe 3 or 4 months ago before the Nico stuff, maybe would have had different answers about it. But I looked at the betting odds. Tennessee's supposed to be a top five team in the SEC. And the thing with Joey Aguilar is I really like him as a prospect. I think he has a lot of raw talent, but his production is so unpredictable. And then that's on top of pretty much the entire receiving core leaving after 2024. So the offense is pretty much retooled from, the quarterback position to the wide receivers. And I really like the upside of some of their prospects on offense. Don't get me wrong, like Mike Matthews is a beast. I love him. But again, I think Tennessee's offense is too much of a question mark. Their defense is going to be their bread and butter always. But they still lost some key guys again to the portal to the draft. So, I think that the defensive line will be a big question for me. But I like Joey Aguilar. Played JUCO ball 20 minutes from where I live. So I've been following Joey Aguilar for quite a while. But his ball control isn't great. He throws a lot of picks. And he's also coming from Appalachian State. Like it's not a similar competition. This is the SEC. So it could be very staggering for him going from, Appalachian State to the SEC. And you got to remember, like 2 months ago, he thought he was going to UCLA. So that guy has
He was at
been dealing
UCLA.
with a lot. What's that?
He was at UCLA.
Well, I mean, he thought he was going to play for UCLA, is what I'm saying. And so, I think Tennessee, they have a lot of good players and they got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. But I mean, people have them finishing fourth, fifth in the SEC, and they're very unproven on offense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I said, the SEC, this is a down year for the SEC, and you guys can agree, disagree, but I think the Big Ten is just, especially at the top, much better than the SEC this year. Obviously, you look at, the ACC, Big 12, it's not great, but, and definitely not better than the SEC, but some of those top teams very much could compete in the SEC, in my opinion. Um,
And I think that's just going off that really quickly. I think that's a scary thing with that Ohio State game being first, against Texas is it's at the shoe, so it's not favoring Texas in anything at all. And OSU could go in and beat Texas by a handful of points. I easily see that happening. And everyone looks at that game down the line when seedings come around. And never really know what's going on with the college football playoffs. Who's going to get in where? And yeah, I think the Big Ten. I would 100% agree with you. The Big Ten is probably better than the SEC right now. But no, there's not a lot of people who want to say that. SEC bias, in my opinion, is a very real thing. It does
Well,
not just mean more.
I'd argue it was the same thing last year too. I think like the SEC last year was good. Like, don't get me wrong, we saw a lot of guys go to the draft and whatnot, but I think it was still worse than the Big Ten. I mean, we saw a Big Ten team win the title, so that's kind of a lazy answer on my part. But at the same time, like the Big Ten lost a lot of QB talent, and Terrence have talked about this a lot. But the Big Ten QB talent this year is still miles better than the SEC. And again, that week one matchup, I mean, I'm just thinking about Julian Sayin versus Arch Manning, two guys who you could be Heisman finalists. I know Julian Sayin hasn't played a game yet, but people are saying that he could win the Heisman, so I'm going to put him in that echelon. But yeah, I think you look at both conferences, just the sheer depth of the Big Ten. The Big Ten does have more teams than the SEC, but I mean, I think the bottom teams in the SEC are also like better than the bottom teams in the Big Ten. So it's weird. It's a weird place we're in right now, but it's like two conferences ruling everything, you know?
I think that's why you normally see like last year, especially those SEC teams. You'll look at the top teams and they'll lose to like someone in the middle of the pack, and then the next week, one of the top teams will lose to someone in the middle of the pack because their top teams are very, very legit, and then you have a little bit of a gap, and then you have literally everybody else. It feels like that are maybe not Mississippi State as you guys pointed out, but like a lot of the teams that are all right there, that are all very legit teams. Whereas the Big Ten, I feel like you have your top teams And then you kind of find everyone else slowly piling down. And it's not necessarily like you got Ohio State, you got Oregon, but like Penn State, and then things kind of who's really beating them. Like USC would be considered in the next tier, and nothing really happened with them in against when they played Penn State. They got destroyed by a tight end who literally played every single position. So it's like I don't really know. That's my opinion.
No, not wrong at all. Um, yeah, this is the first time we're gonna have complete parity with our answers so far. I'm taking Alabama. I'm taking Andrew's choice to win in the SEC. Alabama has an incredibly questionable quarterback situation. They have three guys, all could be very talented, who have not really ever stepped onto the field. They have Ty Simpson, who's likely going to be the quarterback. Austin Mack, who followed Kalen DeBoer from Washington, and then the five-star freshman Keelan Russell. There's no proven winner in this. There's no proven guy who is going to win games. As I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of Jalen Milroe. I think he could work with the Seahawks, but I wasn't a fan of his game in college. The fact that Ty Simpson couldn't beat him out because he very much had the chance to do that last year, or excuse me, 2 years ago in 2023 when Saban was still there, and he couldn't, that's a bad sign. Obviously, it's been a while since then, but if he's not really able to throw the ball that well, how is that proving to me that Alabama fans are going to be able, or that Alabama is really going to get the ball downfield? Yes, you have guys like Ryan Williams, obviously Caden Proctor protecting them on the line, two of the best there. I also think Ryan Williams is a little overrated, but that's another conversation for another day. Andrew, I saw you almost say something before I make another point.
I think no, I'll let you make your point, but I definitely think as someone who had them as who I think is probably going to win, I think I should be able to comment afterwards. So you
Yeah,
can
no,
continue
you
your point.
100% can. Okay, yeah. So my last point, their schedule, their favor, there are 9.5. I think their win total is 9.5 right now. Their schedule is pretty difficult for Alabama standards. They're going to start 3-0 against Florida State, Louisiana, Monroe, and Wisconsin. Then at Georgia, that's a loss. Then a couple weeks later, versus Tennessee at home. That's pretty difficult. I'm not going to count that as a win. At South Carolina, I think that's a loss. Oklahoma sucks. Versus LSU, that could be a loss. And at Auburn, Auburn's sneaky good. I could see 4 to 5 losses in there. Not six. I think Oklahoma sucks, so I don't think they're going to lose that. But I could see 4 to 5 losses, and I think as soon as that happens, I think that Kalen DeBoer is gone. I think they call for his head, and he is done, no matter the buyout he has. But yeah, I think Alabama's going to do it. Quarterback situation, schedule, all sorts of that stuff. Andrew, what is your point?
Yeah, so I want to comment first on the DeBoer situation. He knows that if he doesn't win this year, if he doesn't do good things this year, he's done, which is why a wounded animal is the most dangerous type of animal, right? He's going to pull out every single one of those stops. And going to the Ty Simpson thing, he didn't beat out Milroe because, in my opinion, Milroe obviously objectively better than the guy. But Simpson is so loyal. You look at any of his interviews, and this doesn't relate to skill level whatsoever, right? I'm just going to start on character. So loyal. Stayed with Alabama for I think this is his fourth year.
Oh yeah.
I think he's played 3 years previously, but this is his fourth year with the team. So he's been with Saban. He knows what's up. And it also, if you look, DeBoer is reunited with his O coordinator and quarterback coach in Ryan Grubb, who came down. So now we're really starting up with what is DeBoer's system again. He's going back to that Washington system, and Ty Simpson works better in kind of that mold of he might not have the best arm of all time, but he is more of a throwing guy. He can do all that sort of stuff, right? So if you have a quarterback that's in the system that actually fits into the playbook instead of Milroe, who objectively did not fit into the Alabama playbook, things are going to get better, especially with the best O line. Do I think that Ty Simpson's going to be flawless in his first few games? Absolutely not. But that's why you go to your hardest, the hardest of the 3 preseason games is at Florida State, maybe versus Wisconsin. Both of those, come on, he has time to figure it out. Again, very similar to Arch Manning. I think you really don't pull him unless you're wanting to see other arms quarterback wise, and there's a chance that you might want to switch things up. He needs to learn the system at a high enough level so that when you do go to play at Georgia, do I think that's a win? No. But when you go and you play at Georgia, things are looking a little bit better. I think that Tennessee game, you're right, is a little bit scary. I personally had their floor at 9-3, maybe 8-4, but that Tennessee game's scary. I don't think that South Carolina game's scary, and I do agree that Auburn game at the very end is going to be very sketchy, especially at Auburn. But that is kind of the trampoline going into either bowl games or SEC championship or whatever you want to call it. So I honestly think there's a good shot.
No, you're not wrong. Like all of those are good points. I just part of this reason I say disappoint is because it may be from fan perspective on what you think of Alabama is. Because obviously, I think if they go anything less than 10-2, they'll be calling for his head. Because back-to-back 9-3
Yeah.
seasons, we're talking about the most spoiled fan base in college football. I think that they'll instantly call for Kalen DeBoer's head. Tyler Simpson could be good. I'm not going to say he'll be Michael Penix. I'm not going to, he'll be something in between. We don't really know. That's the problem. That's, I think, my biggest problem with Alabama is we don't know. And that's, I think, a lot of it is on the quarterback situation, especially because you look a bunch of other places who have these more proven quarterbacks. That's kind of why I chose Alabama.
I
Yeah,
think
I understand.
I think the biggest thing with Kalen DeBoer he's shown over his career, whether that be at Washington, whether that be elsewhere, is he has the ability to turn around programs in such a short period of time. We saw him do that with Washington. I mean, took him from a pretty mid-tier team to a CFP finalist, right? So I agree with Andrew there. I think there's a big chance they bounce back, but again, it's all on his shoulders. The pressure is going to be insane. And I think the recruiting prowess as well. Alabama has not been recruiting at the level that they should be recently. And some of their SEC rivals like Georgia moved up. So I think the pressure is on him on the field and off the field this season.
Okay, yeah, no, all agree with that. Not all, I'll. But let's move it on. Who do you guys think is going to be a wild card team? Who could you see maybe making a run to the CFP? Who could you see winning 6, 7 games? Andrew, let's start with you.
Yeah, I said LSU. I think that I don't know if we're necessarily considering them a wild card team. I do. I think that it's a very similar schedule to someone like Texas, except like a level or two down. They start off with a hard game instead of Texas going at Ohio State, they go at Clemson, right? Then they have a few like easier games, Louisiana Tech, Florida, all that. They play at Ole Miss. That's a game that I have already said in the past after I said that Ole Miss is going to be a disappointment. I easily see LSU winning that game. At Vanderbilt, that's not a worry. South Carolina, not a worry. Texas A&M, you play them at home, so that's a good team. But I still think LSU. Basically, what I'm saying is your whole schedule is ramping up toward the bottom at Alabama. And I know that I've been so keen and all that on Alabama, but if you're LSU, everything is looking at that Alabama game. After that, you go and you can kind of cruise downhill. But I think that they can be really good. You talked about it. The quarterback situation is in a great spot. One of like the only quarterbacks it feels like the SEC that has everyone knew he was going to be starting from like as soon as we saw him last year. I mean, even I was watching in the first game that we played against LSU, USC, and I was like, wow, this dude's pretty legit, right? Um, yeah, I don't know. I just think LSU is going to be the biggest wild card team.
Yeah, no, it's very fair. Casey, who do you have? And I will let you guys know. Apparently, we only have 10 minutes left in the Zoom meeting. So, Casey, who
All
do
good.
you have?
I'll try to keep it brief. Yeah, I have the team that won their last six regular season games last year and showed why they could be a legitimate CFP contender this year, and that's South Carolina. The Gamecocks have one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best players in the country in Lenore Sellers. He's a beast. Their schedule at least in conference play is lighter relative to some of the other teams. They have Oklahoma, LSU, and Alabama. Those are kind of the marquee games that I identified. The team's kind of in a weird spot, I'll admit, because they have a high expectations. A lot of people think the Gamecocks are going to be good, but they're still really underrated. A lot of people have them finishing around 10th in the SEC. So, I think they're gonna have chips on their shoulders in that regard. But on top of Sellers, they have one of the best defensive lines in the country. Dylan Stewart is a beast. I love Dylan Stewart. Their O-line is the big question mark, though. I mean, Sellers is gonna have to evade pressure even better than he did last year. I mean, of course he was able to, but again, their O-line is definitely not the strongest position. They lost a lot of guys to the portal. So they're kind of a wild card for me, and that's why I put them there. But if Sellers can overcome the O line not being one of the best in the SEC, I think they can definitely make the CFP, and I think they can make some noise there.
Yeah, my pick is also South Carolina. I'm gonna keep it a little bit brief just because obviously we agree with each other. I'll add two things onto that though. The reason I think that they're a wild card team, obviously you mentioned Laura Sellers. I think he'll be a top five quarterback off the board in the 2026 draft class. But they're going to start off 5-0 in their schedule. It's just going to be. Then after that, at LSU versus Oklahoma versus Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M versus Coastal Carolina, and versus Clemson. That is a difficult end to the schedule. That is brutal. And then, Casey, you mentioned their defensive line. It's going to be great. I agree. Dylan Stewart's fantastic. They lost a lot of people in defense, though. They lost Nick Emanwari, they lost TJ Sanders, and Demetrius Knight, all really talented and major contributors. The defense is going to be a lot worse than what it was last year, and that was a huge part of who they were. I think that they are probably going to regress, even though they're still talented. They have a guy like Sellers at that quarterback position. So yeah, I think I'm going to go South Carolina. Um, and the last superlative we have here, blank for a second. Who do you guys think is a dark horse to win the SEC? And I'm going to be honest, I struggled with this one. I didn't really know which direction I was going to go. So, Andrew, I'll let you go first again.
I think LSU, which is why I chose them as my wild card team. I was actually thinking the Gamecocks for a very long period of time, and then I looked at that schedule, and the back half of that, they're going to get pummeled. It's going to be one loss, two loss, three loss, and they're just going to keep going down, and there's nothing that they're going to be able to do about it. Once the ball starts rolling, it's just so hard to stop it. But LSU, I talked about it before. Schedule wise, they have a good chance to do it, right? They have Nussmeier, all that. Like things are going to go well for them in this season. I feel like they have just the fact that returning quarterback knows the system, all that sort of stuff. Team going up. I think that in general they're in a great spot. And I mean, if I'm using your guys' logic against you, right? Bama is not going to be a worry for them if they end up going far. I think that obviously, Texas and Georgia are going to be the brutal parts of that, right? Because I feel like the top three, as I said, there's levels to it, right? The top three, and debatably only the top two in Texas and Georgia can be scrapped. Sorry, I know I'm taking a lot of time, so I'll switch to someone else. I
You're
think
fine. You're
LSU.
fine. Casey, would you
Yeah,
like to?
you guys talk about South Carolina's schedule being really hard. They had lost to Alabama by 2 points last year. They lost to LSU by three, and they only had three total losses on the year. They beat Texas A&M, Missouri, Clemson. Those are all ranked teams. So I just want to put that out there. But they're not my dark horse because I wanted to change it up. I have a team that you guys probably didn't expect. I got Florida. Because I'm taking dark horse literally. Dark Horse is a team that you really don't expect to make any noise, and they make noise. And I think that's Florida for you. Now, it's a long shot. I'll admit that. After the season they had last year, but they have DJ Lagway and a stellar offensive line. You combine a bright young quarterback, a mobile young quarterback, and a great offensive line and an attitude, you got a good team. Look, I don't care who you are. Also, Jaden Boss slept on running back. So that right there is some really solid offensive pieces. Again, they're really unpredictable, and that's why I have them as a dark horse because of the receiving core. They lost some guys, but they did bring in Trojan killer J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA, so that should be a good addition. But it's still a big question mark there. They're a young and inexperienced team, I'll admit that, and that's why I have them as a dark horse. This is a make or break year for Billy Napier. If he isn't good, he's going to be gone. So I think Florida for me could make some noise in the SEC.
Casey, I was just about to
I
mention.
think we'll know whether
Go on.
I think we'll know whether Florida's good with what happens in games 3 and 4 at LSU and at Miami. That's if you'll be totally right if they can go through those two games and they'll be good. But if they lose both of those, their season's done.
Yeah, Casey, I was just going to say, are you aware that Billy Napier is still the head coach of Florida?
Yeah, I am very
Yeah,
aware.
he sucks. He's terrible. That's my point. That team is so talented. He is a terrible coach. It is a miracle he has kept his job this long. He should have been fired last year. The only reason he's around is because they're worried about losing Lagway.
Well, I mean, who's to say he's not going to have a good year this year?
Oh my God. Me, I'll say that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand also.
My dark horse is going to be Auburn. I think Auburn, I don't think Hugh Freeze is a great coach, so it's kind of a similar position to Florida. Someone is going to be able to throw the ball, though, for Auburn, which they have not had in Hugh Freeze's tenure there. You have Jackson Arnold, Ashton Daniels, Deuce Knight. One of those guys is going to be able to throw the ball. Then at receiver, you got Eric Singleton and Cam Coleman. Those dudes are both dogs. They're going to be able to actually play offense this year. They haven't been able to do that in the past couple of years. They've still almost upset some major teams. You take a look at their schedule. I'll do this real quick. They're going to start off 3-0 at Baylor, Ball State, and South Alabama. At Oklahoma and at Texas A&M are tough versus Georgia. That's a tough 3 game stretch. After that, it's pretty smooth sailing until you get to Alabama. I could easily see this team winning 9, 10 games. I'm going to say 9. 10 feels aggressive because that would mean wins at like both Texas A&M and Oklahoma. I'm going to say 9 games because I still think they're a good team. Like I said, I don't think Hugh Freeze is a great coach. I kind of think he's a shithead. But I think they are a talented enough team to make some moves in the SEC, at least maybe upset one of Alabama, Georgia. Those games are both at home. You never know. The Jungle, oh no, that's their basketball arena. But whatever. The play, I don't know, some Tiger related thing it's a tough place to play. Um, but that is all I have. Do you guys have any concluding thoughts? We have another 2.5 minutes here.
I mean, I think it's like we said, it's a conference that, of course, is going to have eyeballs for, for all the wrong reasons but also the right reasons. Because I think there is a lot of teams that, like we were talking about, could make noise. I think it's like a really top heavy conference. Like we know that Texas and Georgia and like you throw LSU, Bama in there are going to be like your top four maybe. But after that, it's pretty unpredictable. We see upsets. We saw Vanderbilt kind of make some noise last year. So like, who's to say that that this conference is going to be set in stone? Like I don't think anybody is. But again, I think it's going to be really interesting come CFP season how many of these teams actually get in because, of the SEC just getting a lot of bids usually.
I, my final thought, I see each of Texas, Georgia, and Alabama losing a random one in this season. I think that is very, very plausible. And I just genuinely see that happening just because of the randomness of this conference and how good, like, hey, even though you said it's top heavy, I think that at any day, if a random team plays good, then they can beat one of the top teams if they play bad.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with all of that. Um, Andrew, Kasey, thank you both very much for joining me. Now, two-time guest Kasey Kazliner, one-time guest Andrew. Definitely going to have you guys back on during college football season, talk all sorts of that stuff, not just SEC, all of college football as a general. But guys, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye.